Hello, and welcome to Ron's Apple Transporter Roundtable. This is the annual KansasFest Megapodcast, which we do every year, where individual retro computing enthusiasts who are also podcast hosts amalgamate themselves into one giant crossover event. And this is that event with the three of us.
Mhm. Maybe more but I think some people are just exhausted.
It's been a heck of a weekend. You know, a lot of us sit at our computers Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and this weekend we didn't get a break from that. It was certainly worth it and certainly something we opted into and are happy to have done so, but it does tax our eyes and energy for all this online connection. But like I said, it was worth it, and we're here to chat all about everything we saw and did this past weekend. Let's go around and introduce ourselves. Ron, would you like to start?
Sure, why not? Hey, I'm Ron from Ron's Computer Videos, regardless of what the name tag says.
What is Ron's computer videos?
It is. I tried to make it as just as on its face as possible. I'm Ron. I make videos about computers on the YouTubes, and it
Brilliant.
tries to focus on Apple II, Macintosh, and DOS era PC stuff.
Awesome. And I think this was your fourth Kansas Fest?
I've been to the virtual ones. I went to both virtual ones and
Oh,
then all the in-person ones, and then this year.
so this is your
So
sixth.
five,
Six.
six? I don't know. Well,
2020,
oh
21,
wow,
22, 23, 24, 25.
wow. Yes, quite a few.
Congratulations.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I'm vested for retirement now.
Almost, almost. You got to keep coming, though, because the percentage ticks up.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And Megan.
Hello, I'm Megan Lemmert, lead developer of the KansasFest team, and also co-host or a co-host of the Retro RPG Roundtable.
Yeah, remind us what those things are. What is Nox Archaist?
KansasFest is a sword and sorcery style role-playing game for the Apple II that my team and I released about 5 years ago. It was like December of 2020. It was the COVID year, the first year there was the virtual KansasFest. So,
Mhm.
took 5 years prior to that to release at that point, and release an expansion pack in spring of 2023, and now working on a sequel, Nox Archaeus 2 Dragon's Mirror. You'll be seeing more of my dragon back there. This is just a sneak peek.
Awesome. And ethics and games journalism. I backed the Kickstarter.
Thank you very much for your support. Much appreciated.
And like our listeners should, I also backed the Patreon for 6502 Workshop to fund the development of Nox Archaeus 2 Dragon's Mirror.
And thank you very much for that as well. And if anyone is interested in supporting us that way, who isn't already, you can do so at 6502 workshop I'm sorry, I had that mixed up. You can do so at patreon.6502workshop.com.
Very cool. And those links will be in the show notes, which will appear wherever this show is appearing. The audio is probably going to appear on a lot of different feeds. I know at least Open Apple, which is the show I co-host. Hi, my name is Ken Gagney. And 14 years ago, I co-launched, is that a word? Open Apple with M. McGinnis. It was the Apple II community's first co-hosted Apple II podcast. And we actually did a new episode just this year for the first time in maybe 8 years or so. With Quinn Dunkey, who has also been a longtime co-host of that show. And I also co-host a Star Trek podcast, which is not retro computing. It's where we review new episodes of Star Trek, whether it's Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds, or Starfleet Academy. And I am having a different co-host for each season. Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3 just debuted this past week, and I'm co-hosting Transporter Lock with M. McGinnis from Open Apple. So
Wow.
those are the two shows I'm representing this week. Yeah, it's great to be back on the air with a familiar voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have all just come off 2 or 2.5 days of KansasFest 2025, which this year was held entirely virtually.
Mm-hmm.
A bit different tech in the background, but very often in the past they've used Zoom and zoomed it into YouTube, and this year we use StreamYard. And I understand, Ron, you were, is the right word, mastermind behind this technological setup. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
I'll accept instrumental, or maybe a strong encourager. Either one of those is probably really good. But the Zoom is okay. But you know what? You know what I hate about Zoom? The fact that I am locked into watching it on a computer or having to hook a computer up in the living room to be able to watch it. This year, we made a decision kind of early on to use YouTube to stream the event, so that way that it would open up, give people more opportunities for how they could actually kind of consume that content. And hopefully it was comfortable for people to be able to use like their Apple TV or Roku or whatever streaming box you've got parked, your smart TV, whatnot, set up to that way you could just sit, watch it on a big screen, enjoy it with your family. And then if you want to interact on Discord or something like that, use your phone or your laptop or iPad or whatnot to make those type of interactions. But hopefully it from a viewer point of view, was enjoyable this year. I will say that from someone that worked in the bowels of the ship for 3 days, it is probably a lot less trouble than trying to do this on Zoom, just because Zoom is more or less like what we're doing here tonight, where it's just like we've just got people and we're just talking, and somebody might share something, but you are now broadcasting it individually to a bunch of people and splitting out bandwidth and things that and unless you're on just like the most pristine of connections, can cause people a little bit of grief. Like I know in past years there's been some little technical hiccups and stuff, not through any fault of KFest or anything like that, but there's a lot that can go wrong. So using a service that basically sits as an intermediary between your on-air talent, your people that are behind the scenes running the switching, and all of that, and serving your media, and then your people that are your guests on that stream, having an intermediary service where everybody kind of comes to that as equals in terms of access and bandwidth and things, seems to have made things move a little bit smoother this year. So what we're working on right now is you have StreamYard, basically is that intermediary, and then you can restream to other locations. This year it was YouTube, but their service adds new destinations all the time. So very possibly in 2027 or 2026 rather, for a virtual event, it'd be very easy to add a platform like Twitch or add other locations that people want to see this content, but maybe don't necessarily interact with YouTube or other things like that. So in terms of like growing the KFest brand, especially in these like virtual events, this I think better leverages the group to be able to make those steps forward.
Yeah, we have a comment in Discord from RoboHack saying he definitely enjoyed being able to watch on a couch and TV easily this year. I don't know why that setup didn't occur to me. I've attended every virtual KansasFest using my laptop and an external monitor. Unexpectedly, I didn't have an external monitor this past weekend. And I do have my Apple TV, though, and I should have just moved out of this office that I'm in now and to the couch in the other room and just watched it there with my laptop in my lap to use Discord and Apple TV streaming the YouTube. I guess I apparently needed somebody to tell me to do that because I didn't figure it out on my own.
I think it's one of those things where there was a lot of new things that kind of happened this year. There's been some changes at KansasFest in terms of like leadership. There's been changes in kind of the way that these interactions happen and how all of how things were broadcast this year. But appearing on the screen, which people listening to the podcast aren't going to be able to see, but you'll just have to take my word for it, that one of the nice things you can do in StreamYard is when people interact with you on the stream, you can basically have a little comment pop up. So that way that guests or hosts don't necessarily have to have, we've all been to that panel at a convention where the William Shatner is up in the front and he's straining to hear the people, and he might hear the question, but then he just repeats an answer and nobody hears like what Mr. Shatner, what was your favorite episode of TJ Hooker? No one else got to hear that. That was just for him. But StreamYard kind of democratizes a lot of the way that you can interact with people, and hopefully just makes it more accessible to people.
One more question for you, Ron, about the setup, which is, well, I guess this isn't really about the setup, but every time a StreamYard session began on YouTube, it would show the committee members, the 5 of them that were present, introducing the event. So like it would be you and Chris and Peter and Jay, etc. When I go to KansasFest.org/committee, your name's not there.
Oh, it's a secret. I'm not on the committee. This is the secret about KansasFest. It turns out anybody can help. All you have to do is step forward and say, I see that you guys have a need. I see that there's a gap in something that you guys are doing. And rather than just be somebody that says like, I don't like this, you're doing it wrong, you can be proactive and just step forward and say, hey, what can I do to help you guys? I see you're struggling with this. Let's make it better. I love this event. How do I help?
And I love that Megan did that a lot last year. You were one of the Hackfest judges, I believe, not just last year, but in many years. Last year, you were also coordinating dinner outings when it was an in-person event, kind of hard to do this year, unless you're going to order pizza to be delivered to 187 people. But yeah, Megan, you've been coming to KansasFest for a while as well.
Yeah, my first year was 2017. So if we count the virtual years in there, that's it's six in-person years, 1 virtual year, so plus 2 virtual years, including this one. So that's got to be 8. 8. This year would be my 8th KansasFest. Yeah, absolutely. And it was the sort of thing like you were saying last year, Ken. It was having been to the event a lot of times. I kind of had a feel for how things ran, what ran well, what maybe didn't always run as well, and things that used to run well stopped running well, like the whole thing with the dinner. Trying to remember how all that went, but it was like when I first came to KansasFest in 2017, there was a system that worked, and it was like everybody got in to the Rockhurst Commons, and somebody on a microphone would say, if you have a car and you're willing to take people, hold up the number of fingers you have for the number of seats that you have, and then the people that flew in, whatever, they would gravitate to the people with the hand up and and it all sorted itself out really fairly easily. And then what I noticed is, because of course naturally over time, committee members turn over and go on to do other things, and new people join, and that was a tradition that I don't know how far back it went, but it didn't kind of get passed forward. And so there were a few years there where I noticed some chaos in the dinner order dinner assembly process there. So yeah, last year I just kind of jumped in and reintroduced that system that had worked in the past, that had stopped working and then worked again, as well as I added something in about because it was new last year with we were figuring out like the destinations of where to go. Whereas in Kansas City, we had the tradition of basically we go to Freight House Plaza, where there's Jack Stack and Lydia's and I think one other restaurant. And we didn't have that. We were all figuring it out. And so the first night of dinner outings, like groups forming around where they wanted to go was difficult. It wasn't just, who has seats in the car, because people are going to different places. And so then when the second dinner outing happened, I solved it with a few sheets of paper and a Sharpie, and just wrote down restaurant names. Yeah, there we go. Wrote down one restaurant name per 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, set the sheets of paper out on the tables in the big room. And it's just like, okay, well, if you're interested in one of these restaurants, go stand by the name, and the groups could then cluster around, the restaurant decision. And I thought, well, most likely there's going to be somebody, that's a driver within, those subgroups, and it seemed to work pretty well. So I don't know if that's what we'll do in future years or not, but next year, certainly, if it's a similar sort of a situation, I'll be happy to pull out the sheets of paper and the Sharpie and solve dinner again.
But
Yeah, well,
that you're 100% right. It's just, sorry, Ken, I didn't mean to trip on you there, but I was just going to say that it's just people taking the initiative to make things better for our friends, and that's 100%. That's exactly the right attitude to have. Just step up, be the person that flips open the top of the box on the pizza. Just like little tiny things. It doesn't make a huge contribution. Yeah.
Because the committee is so busy. I mean, we can all see that at these events. And especially last year with it being a new location.
Mhm.
I mean, I could just see, Chris and Kate and Peter all running around with all these things. And it's like, the last thing they had the brain bandwidth for are these little, in comparison, relatively little details. These things I was seeing where there was the room for improvement. And so, and in this case, because it was a little bit more of like a, take charge of the situation with a group kind of thing. I asked before I did this. I mean, the pizza boxes, I'd say go ahead and just do that. But do that on your own. But for something like taking over the how the dinner gets organized. I mean, I asked somebody on the committee before doing that, but it was a really easy yes because they are so happy when they get help.
It's like, Megan, you have time to do this?
Yeah, please
do this.
I remember one year, one of the one individual was so upset with the schedule meister for the way that their session had been mishandled, in their opinion, and I heard them storming off saying, "How many years have they been doing this, and they still can't get it right?" Well, they had just had committee turnover that year, and the schedule meister for that year had never done it before. This was their very first time. And so I think it's helpful to sort of frame mistakes in one of three categories. There is genuine mistakes because people don't know better. There's people being overwhelmed and not being able to do all the things that they want to, which Megan was just referring to. And then there's also genuinely bad decisions that you disagree with. And we're not talking about that third one right now. We're talking about, here are the ways that volunteers can help with the first two. People make mistakes, people get overwhelmed, and additional hands, additional volunteers help with that.
I think that there's a lot of people that do these presentations and are very excited and very, very knowledgeable about their topic, but there's a couple of things they're going to need to get themselves squared with, and that's that right there. If you want to see a successful event that runs on time, you have to keep your presentation on time.
And for those listening to the audio version, Ron was holding up time warnings that you have 10 minutes left, you have 5 minutes left. I have been a conference volunteer at WordCamp holding up those signs. I've been on stage at PAX East and Portland Retro Gaming Expo reading those signs. And there was one time when I needed my talk to go over. Not for content reasons. It was actually more of a social justice reason that I won't get into. But while the rest of my panelists were talking, I got up, went off stage, spoke to the person running the room, and I said, I need this to run an extra 5 minutes, and here's why. And they said, we don't really do that, but I understand your reason, so yes.
Yeah.
So,
we're human beings, but I do have one of those really big, long vaudeville hooks. In a worst case scenario, it's coming out.
Ron, I was actually waiting to ask, after the 5-minute warning card, is the next one a picture of one of those hooked canes? And sounds like you're on it.
Either that or you're just darting people.
All right. So I'm aiming to keep this podcast around about an hour, if that's okay, which means we're a third of the way through. We should start chatting about this year's KansasFest and what we liked about it. Does anybody want to start with any highlights, moments, or favorite sessions?
Go, Megan.
Oh, I made a couple of notes about things that stood out to me this year. And there's so much, throughout the course of an event like this. So, it's really just a wonderful Apple II buffet of content. And one thing that jumped out at me was during Chris Torrance's presentation on Apple II TS. He briefly played, I believe he said it was an alpha demo of Skull Island, a game that's going to be released this fall, or target date of this fall, from 8-Bit Workshop.
Mhm.
And for those that don't know, 8-Bit Workshop is a group of Apple II developers that have been putting out games for, I want to say, a couple of years now. They've got actually about a half dozen games that they've released. They tend to be kind of strategy games in orientation, if I remember correctly. And then Skull Island, I think that one's going to be a little bit, have a little bit more of a fantasy bend to it. And so when Chris was testing us up as an emulator, he popped up this, alpha, and it was the first actual peek at some of the game content that I'd seen on Skull Island. And of that, what particularly jumped out at me was the Mockingbird music. Well, I should say the music, because I was like, wow. And I posted into the chat that Dan Henderson was in the chat, who's one of the 8-Bit Workshop folks. And I said, Dan, is that Mockingbird music? And he said, yeah, this is exactly what he said. He said, yes, it's true Mockingbird converted from PT3, which is ZX Spectrum music. And I am not a 8-Bit music expert. I wouldn't even call myself 8-Bit music competent. I wrote the game engine for Nox Archaeist, and somebody else did the music, and I screwed in the screws and twisted the bolts and hooked it together, but I don't know much about the music side of it on the technical details. However, what stood out to me about it was, that's got to be the best Mockingbird music I think I've ever heard. It sounded to me like music that was coming from a next-gen system, not from an Apple II Mockingbird. So I need to ask him a little bit more about what they're doing there. And maybe it's this conversion from the ZX Spectrum side of things that somehow is helping with that. But I found that really interesting. So anyone who is interested in Apple II games, definitely check out 8-Bit Workshop and what they've got going on with Skull Island and the other titles. And if you like great 8-Bit music, definitely check them out for that as well.
Cool.
Awesome. What about you, Ron?
Oh, I very much enjoyed. You got to be careful because you're supposed to say you love all your children, right? But I would say that I very much enjoyed Rob Kim's update about the Tangy Pack. I have one of those, so it's always neat to hear about what the latest updates are on that. I really enjoyed Jeff Mazur's presentation about him getting started with computing and all the cool boards and products he made over the years, and even today, cool projects that he's involved with, like the X Drive and all that. And he's got a brand new board that's coming out that's kind of got a Back to the Future kind of theme to it too. I really enjoyed that. I like the interview with Dan Bricklin just because I was very lucky. I got to work with Jay Graham to interview Dan about VisiCalc and about his early career in computing, and get to hear all of his. It went so long; it ended up being a 2-part interview. It was getting to be about an hour, and Dan's like looking at his watch, and I finally was just like, "All right, let's cut for a second because we're going to go ahead and we'll do like a little wrap up thing for that, but then let's do a part 2. We've got a lot more questions to ask you if you have time to answer them." And he was like, "Well, I was just kind of worried I was boring you guys," and I'm like, "You don't understand. KFest is where your people This is your target audience for all of this. We want to hear everything. Share stuff that you think is of no interest to anybody. I promise that people are going to be hanging on your every word. And so
It's great that not only he had so much to say, but that he had the time in his schedule to say it
Yeah.
all. I'm reminded of a time when I interviewed Al Lowe of Leisure Suit Larry,
yeah.
and he was loquacious.
Yes.
He, the ratio of words in my question to words in his answer was disproportionate, which
Yeah.
I loved because, again, target audience. But at like the end of the hour, I still had so many more questions left. And I asked him, can we keep going or can we schedule a second session? He's like, not really. I'm a busy guy. I was like, well, all right, speed round. I'm just going to fire these questions at you. Let's get some quick answers. I'm glad that Dan Bricklin was able to afford you the answers that the questions deserved.
Oh, yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. And there were so many great sessions today. I want to thank everybody that showed up and took time out of their schedule to create like a cool presentation. I mean, it's so much knowledge and so much just excitement that people love these topics, and you absolutely can hear it in every little utterance that they make. Like Martin had a great presentation about Apple Pascal, and I learned a lot today. I was a Pascal programmer a million years ago, but to hear kind of how that all started, it was very interesting to learn more.
Mm-hmm. And the Back to the Future theme card you mentioned from
Yeah.
JD Micro and Jeff
Mhm.
Mazur. So when he mentioned that in his presentation, he said, this is our April Fool's product. And I thought to myself, either that means it's a joke or it means he just happened to release it on April 1st, which would be bad timing.
Yeah.
But he mocked up like an actual advertisement. He had an actual card. And I started thinking, oh, this is a real product. Maybe we should review this in Juice.js. And then I read the product description.
Yeah.
And it's very clearly not real. It's called the Flux.
Well, here's the deal. One exists. I saw it. It's in the video. I don't think it was an AI video of that physical card. So at least one exists.
Well, right.
So,
that's why I say he mocked up not just an advertisement, but an actual card. It's just that the card only has a visual function.
Yes.
Right. Because if you were to read the card description, it's a backup card, and it says that it enables you to restore backups from before you even installed the card. And I was like, now I get it.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I'd love to have one because it's one of those things. It's like Texelec made like the Big Bad Barda, which is a ISA card for PCs that is nothing but Varda batteries. Like it's like 30 Varda batteries on this board just waiting to leak inside your machine. So these comical boards and stuff, I love that stuff. I think that enough people turned around. It's like Silver Lake or somebody that they made a case, like a modern ATX case for PCs that looks like an old beige case, and it was their April Fool's Day joke like a year or two ago, and there was so much interest that they were like, oh well, we'll make one, and now they're making a tower version.
Well, I mean, ThinkGeek used to do that every year. They had a Star Wars Tauntaun sleeping bag as an April Fool's joke, and people were like, no, actually we want that, so they made it.
I think we're at the point where there's people love whimsy. So why not cash the checks?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you actually can get those Flux cards. The website says if you actually do want one of these, please drop us a line. And so it's not an online store. There's no price listed. But if enough people express an interest, maybe they'll cut you a deal.
Yeah. Here's hoping.
Yeah. So that link will also be in the show notes if I remember.
Nice.
I attended a lot of great sessions this weekend, and like you said, it's hard to pick out just a few because you're inevitably going to leave out somebody that worked just as hard as anybody else. But this is a limited time podcast. I will say that I loved Randy Kindig's interview with Chuck Morrow. Randy came to a single KansasFest in person many years ago, and it was great to have him back, even in a virtual capacity. And I understand that Chuck's book, actually, I have the link to it right here. He wrote a book called A Silicon Valley Memoir from Apple to Zilog, and it's available in print only for $25. It's a paperback, 169 pages, and unsurprisingly, sales of that book went up as a result of Randy's sharing his interview with Charles on the KansasFest stream. So that was really cool to hear. Let's see, I got the schedule here pulled up here. Obviously, I enjoyed the Dan Bricklin interview. One of the things that surprised me about Dan Bricklin was just that he's still willing to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much research you did, Ron, you and Jay, I'm sure that there were stories Dan shared with you that he has shared before. And when I interviewed Al Lowe, he said, the only condition under which you can interview me, Ken, is if you ask me questions I haven't been asked before. And that's not easy to do for somebody who's been in the industry for this long.
Sure.
But you did it. It was a great interview.
Yeah. What would you even ask Al Lowe? You'd be like, did you watch NBC last night? I mean, I heard it's must-see TV.
My interview with Al ended up being a cover story for an issue of Juice GS, so you can read all about it, whatever issue that was, many years ago. Chris Torrance every year is very reliable in showing us the new features for Apple II TS, some of which I had read about but not actually seen in action yet. So I love that visual component and just being able to actually see it in action. I feel like there were a couple of other talks that were great. But yeah, I liked Javier's talk today about, interfacing classic tech with modern tech. Like, hey, our computers are getting older, so are our eyes. Let's hook up our Apple II to a nice big monitor or even a TV. Yeah. And here are the ways to do that. And we all know that we can do that, but just sort of taking a step back and looking at the plethora of ways that there are to intersect these eras was a nice reminder that, yeah, we can do all these things and it's not cheating. Yeah, so that's just a few of my highlights. I'm sure I could go on for hours.
Well, there was definitely, if Dan Bricklin had been live and it wasn't recorded, there was definitely a question that he's been asked before that I wanted to ask him about. And Ken, you know what it is. I saw Dan Bricklin on the PBS documentary Triumph of the Nerds, like back in the 90s, mid-90s, I think is when that came out. And he was interviewed for that. And there was a story that he told, which is one of my favorite stories from computing history. And I actually mentioned it in the Juice GS article in June. And I would have loved to have heard him talk more about it. But the upshot of it is that he described a convention, something or other that he was at, demoing VisiCalc, and it was like a convention of accountants. And so he was showing kind of the run the numbers, kind of stuff, in VisiCalc. And he said the looks on the faces of this room full of accountants, it was like, this absolutely slack-jawed, stares, and their hands were like shaking and saying like, that's what we do all week. And people were like throwing credit cards at him. I mean, he just described this, the scene that just like makes sense, when we think about the impact, like he was telling us in the interview, Ron, the impact that the software had on industry and things like that. So I always thought that was just a really profound moment in computing history, and that story really encapsulated it so well. So he told a lot of great stories in the interview, and that was just a really great get as far as a featured speaker. That was just awesome.
Yeah, that's 100% Jay. Jay put that all together, is my understanding. He
Thank you, Jay.
He's the one that did the legwork on that. I was just lucky enough to be along for the ride.
That's awesome.
And you said that Dan, at the time that the interview was aired, was in Greenland?
Yeah, he was telling us that that he was going on vacation with his family and would not really be available, just and more or less like time zone stuff and family stuff. And so, but if we were to put together some questions, he would see what he could do about getting them answered. So if people go out to the Discord contemporary to when this podcast airs, you can probably ask questions, watch the Dan Bricklin interviews, and then go ask a question, and then we'll see if we can get him to follow up with that. So no promises. He's a busy guy. He's got a lot going on, but it's nothing ventured, nothing gained.
I believe there is a plaque in the classroom at Harvard University that says, in this room, Dan Bricklin conceived of the idea of the first electronic spreadsheet. When that happened, I believe he was living at the time in the nearby suburb of Boston of Arlington, Massachusetts. And I lived in Arlington for many years. And I think it was in Wikipedia or some other easily accessible source that I found a picture of the house he lived in at the time. But of course, this picture is from the 70s. It was not digital originally. It was scanned and at a very low res. And there's not enough context around the photo for me to figure out where the house is. I shared it with some friends of mine who had lived in Arlington even longer than I had, and I asked them, do any of you recognize this house? And they said, Ken, that could be any one of hundreds of houses in this town. They're all double deckers on tree-lined, shady, sleepy little side streets. So I would love to find that house and, I don't know, put up a plaque here and be like, this is where Dan Bricklin dreamed of VisiCalc.
Right.
But
yes.
I think that might cross a line, and I just don't want to be that much of a fanboy. The fact that I spent that much time thinking about it is probably bad enough. Is there anything that you would have liked to have seen at this year's KansasFest, or anything that could have been done not necessarily better, but just differently? Ron?
Oh no, I was pointing at Megan. Megan, you go first.
I don't think so. I mean, this is the 5th virtual event, and I think the bugs have been kind of worked out of it, so to speak, over the years here, and the committee and those helping like Ron seem to really kind of have it down. And granted, there were some changes this year behind the scenes, like with StreamYards, which sounds like was a net benefit, but from a consumer attendee standpoint, all the content was there. I guess one thing comes to mind, and this I don't think this is really particularly actionable, but I noticed that the first year there was kind of like some lively after-hour activities and chatter, and there were some channels set up for that, some voice channels and things of that. And I know the idea, in that first year that was the COVID year, we were trying to really replicate that Coricon Hall, Commons kind of experience. And I thought that was a really fun part of the event that kind of happened later into the evening after the scheduled programming was done. But then I also noticed in the subsequent years that really trailed off as far as people participating in it, even though the channels were still there. This year I noticed that the channels weren't set up for it, which I'm guessing is because the interest, and use of it, really had just kind of trailed off. But so it's that was one thing that I guess I wish was there. But I don't think this is something that can be solved with a committee decision, because the interest also has to be there.
Right.
So, yeah, that's one thing that comes to mind as I think about it.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we did try to there are 4 of those voice channels that kind of run all the time out there on their Discord. So there's just 2 general chats. There's a specific hardware chat, and there's a gaming chat. I don't specifically know if they're all set up for video. I don't know if they were created as video channels, but that is something absolutely to look into and to think about, because I think any event, like you're 100% right, any event lives and dies on interaction and with how people feel about that event. So giving people more ways to communicate, more ways to keep the fun alive is definitely to that event's benefit. So that's something we'll definitely have to do. Now, I did see a few people in the voice channels earlier today, because I think what happened was some of these conversations split off because people were maybe it's a little more intense kind of conversation more than what text was going to contain. And I did see a few people hop in those voice only channels.
Okay.
So maybe there was a tiny bit of use, but yeah, it's not like after hours there's 50 people in there. I would love to see that too. But I think what you have to do is you've got to drive people in there with some kind of content thing where it's like,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to have like we're going to play board games, or we're going to play you know, like you don't know Jack or something like that through Discord, and yeah, then that would drive it. But KFest in person, the first year that I attended in like after pandemic stuff, I brought my laptop, and I brought You Don't Know Jack, and I brought some other party game kind of stuff, and just set it up there in the lobby. And people were kind of like, I don't know. But then I got it up and I was like, let's just play one round. And now it's midnight and people are like, oh, I probably ought to get to bed. And I'm like, yeah, one more round. So I would love to have those type of experiences and those interactions like in Discord too. So we just got to work harder on it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, Ron, because it gives me the opportunity to say that I always really enjoyed those, those game activities that you set up like that. I don't remember if this is I don't know Jack, but there was one that you had where it's like, there's like movie lines being played.
Yeah, the Riff Tracks game. Yeah,
the Riff Tracks. Yeah, that was always my favorite, and we've been doing that like each year since I think 2019. Or maybe it wasn't 2019. I remember we did it twice in Rockhurst, but that might have been like 22 and 23. But anyway, yeah, that was awesome. That to me was like exactly what After Hours was about. And if there would be a way to set up an activity like that in an After Hours channel in Discord, I could totally see that would, like you said, drive participation at that point. So that would be cool. Give a little bit more of a whole experience, because otherwise, it's a little bit of a at the end of the day at like 5:30, I feel all I'm like all amped up on Apple II, and then suddenly it's like, what? That's it? The version of it, I'm so used to like keeping going until midnight, and now it's so that was a little different.
Building off what you said, Megan, I would say that if I could change one thing about this year, we would have been all together. And there were elephant in the room. There was a lot of pressure to just keep down the path that the event was on, but there was more pressure to be like, we need to listen to the people that attend this event. And if our friends say that something we're doing is hurting them, we just have to listen. And I say we, like royal we, maybe, because I'm speaking for myself on this. If somebody says that something's going on that they don't like, you have to go out in the backyard and drown your ego in a bucket and just listen to them and say, maybe this isn't me. Maybe I've got a blind spot for whatever this thing is. So I'm going to listen to this person that's my friend, and I'm going to do things that protect our friendship. And so this year, it would have been really great for everybody to be together. It didn't work out, but next year, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. I'm looking to see old friends, new friends. I want to see everybody, because I feel like we've all been apart too long. And 2 years feels like way too long. So I hope that people listening, I hope people that have been have an axe to grind. I hope people that have been drinking poison, hoping that other people are going to die, can use this year's success and as an opportunity to be like, hey, I need to reevaluate this and just be like, you know what? My friends are more important than holding on to a grudge, or my friends are more important than like being mad about something, because there's a point where other people just move on for better or worse. And the only person that's sitting in their room still harping on something is you. And I want to see you. I don't want you to be alone. I love you and I want to be your friend and I want you to be here. So I want to see those people in 2026, because I think that when we're all together again, all those negative feelings are going to melt away and we're going to remember why we're friends in the first place.
Well said, Ron. No
Well
arguments
said.
here.
Well said. Thank you for your wise words and compassionate words.
I think in it's another one of those things where it's in the words of a smart man, fix your hearts or die. And you either move forward or you just stagnate, and that's nowhere good to be. So I think the event's moving forward. I think people are moving forward, and whatever that means for those individuals, I want to see you. So get here.
And a few of us are fortunate that although we do lament not seeing each other at KansasFest this year, we will be seeing each other a week from now at Knit Hello. Megan and I will be there. This is an Apple II convention that's just 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. Doesn't include housing like KansasFest does, so it's going to be a very different vibe. It's going to be a smaller event, I think maybe about 50 people, which, to be fair, is bigger than some KansasFests. But it's going to be held at a computer museum just outside of Baltimore, Maryland. And I am really looking forward to it. It's a new event, inaugural year, run by people who have experience running retro computing events. And I am totally going to be there. It's going to be about a 7 or 8 hour drive from where I am now. And that's absolutely worth it. So I'm going to show up. I'm going to see some friends. I'm going to make some new ones. People who I've been chatting with online for literally decades that I've never met because they've never made the trip to Kansas City, but they're on the East Coast and this is an easy trip for them. So whatever venue, a place, or an event like an Hello or KansasFest chooses is going to attract a different audience. Like last year, University of Illinois in Springfield, a lot of people drove in from St. Louis or Chicago who had never been to KansasFest before. And that was fantastic for them. Less so for people who are in, say, Omaha or Wichita. And that's totally understandable. And one demographic isn't better than the other, but the fact that we're attracting a different audience with different venues means that people who have not gotten to enjoy KansasFest for decades, like some of us have, are finally getting that taste of in-person retro computing enthusiasm. And I hope that people have that experience at one event and then want to go to all of them.
Oh, yeah. I will say this, though, that everybody committed to this being a car-based culture. And if you live in the Midwest, 10 hours is driving distance. That is just the fact of the matter. So
I'll be driving. I agree with you.
Yeah. I live 2 hours south of St. Louis. So Chicago is 6 hours. Kansas City is 6 hours. Memphis is 4 hours. Nashville is 5 hours. Everything is a drive. So you just have to commit to the idea of getting there. And there are people out on the KFest group that do rideshare, things like that. I'm certain that anything can be organized. If there's a will, there's a way, right? So I will say, though, it is really good, the idea that you're not maybe locked down in one location. You can move things a little bit. I know in the past that there's been this idea that it's like we can only be within so far from the KC area. But I think with the demographic changes of the group and the leadership and stuff, that ice is thawing. That the idea that you'd be able to have it a little further away from those areas is meeting with less resistance. So who knows? Maybe in the future there would be a a K-Fest Texas, or depending on what the climate is at that time, or a K-Fest Chicago, or Lord knows. It's the future will tell.
Yeah, it's in many ways, although these are challenging times, they're also exciting times because we are on the cusp of possibility. We don't know what next year's Kansas Fest is going to look like, but we have every reason to believe that change is in the air and it's going to be awesome.
I meant to also say I was very lucky. I got to interview the coordinators, or the people that are putting on Annette Hello, and got to learn a lot about the venue and everything. And it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very envious. I've got a work conflict, or otherwise I would be there this coming weekend. So if you've not read more about it, definitely get out there and read about the event. If you're close enough, sign up, get there. It's going to be a good time.
Where did you interview them? Was that on your YouTube channel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I totally missed it. I'll have to include a link in the show notes for my own benefit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So when you say the organizers, is that Paul and Kate?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep.
Was that before or after I interviewed them for Juice GS?
It was well, it probably contemporary to that, but because the nature of the media, mine came out first. But I made sure to ask them, hey, I don't want to do any scoop type stuff. Do we want to wait until after it's in Juice GS? But I think that they were coming up on the deadline for registering for, or like the hotel block was going to expire. So they were like, it might be good to get the word out. And I said, then let's go.
Awesome. No, that's very timely. And that's totally something you should take advantage of with your medium, is the quick turnaround. You don't come out once every 3 months and then a week or two later, after the post office has processed it, you get to publish at your own schedule, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is one more thing about this year's Kansas Fest, which I neglected to mention when talking about my favorite sessions, which is the Friday night classic rewind.
Mm-hmm.
This was a new thing this year, where rather than wait until Saturday morning to kick off the event, they decide, hey, let's all get together Friday night after work and just play some old Kansas Fest talk videos.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know that's what they were going to be doing. I just thought it was going to be some sort of an informal gathering Friday night, like Jackbox or whatever. And the first video they put up was Mike Westerfield's keynote speech from Kansas Fest 1998,
mm-hmm.
which I forgot or something that this was on YouTube. This video has been on YouTube on the Kansas Fest channel for like 9 or 10 years. For all I remember, I may have been the one to upload it, but I haven't seen it. I haven't actually sat down and watched it since I was in the audience back in 1998 at my first Kansas Fest. And not only was I blown away by all the memories that came flooding back to me, but then Chris Torrance, out of the blue, on a whim, texted me and said, hey, do you want to come on the stream and talk about this as somebody who was there when it happened? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And then we were able to bring in Eric Shepard as well, because Sheppy was in the audience for that talk also. And we started thinking about all the people who we met at that event, like Lauren Damewood, who, if you've been to a Kansas Fest before the pandemic, you got to meet Lauren, who would go around weaving bracelets out of cotton and just putting them on people like a tag and release program. Or Gina Sakin, who used to work for Quality Computers and whose daughter Carrie came to her first Kansas Fest last year. So I was at the first. Gina was at my first Kansas Fest, and I was at her daughter's first Kansas Fest, which I love the synchronicity of. Or Max Jones, the founder of Juice GS. Like when I was 19 attending my first Kansas Fest, I just had no filter, no compunction. And at Kansas Fest, if your dorm door is open, that means people can just walk in and talk to you. They don't even have to knock.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I saw this one guy sitting in his room with the door open, and I just walked in, stuck up my hand, and said, hi, I'm Ken Gagney. And his face broke into this big grin because he recognized my name, and he said, well, hi, Ken, I'm Max Jones. And it was the editor of the magazine that I was a subscriber to.
Yeah.
So all these people who I stayed in touch with. I just had dinner with Max last August, 11 months ago, and I just got an email from him yesterday. It's and Lauren Danewood used to stay at my house while he went to sci-fi conventions in Boston and taught jewelry making workshops.
Mm-hmm.
These are some names that I forgot to mention when Chris asked me, "Who did you meet at KansasFest 1998? Who you've stayed in touch with?" And it's just the impact that KansasFest and more broadly the Apple II community has had on my social life, my professional life. I mean, there are other things in my life that have had just as big an impact, but this is one of them. And I'm so profoundly grateful I had the opportunity to go to my first KansasFest back in '98 and get that ball rolling.
Well, I would have never met either of you had it not been for KansasFest. Online interactions and stuff are one thing, but to be able to get there and shake hands and give people a big hug and just say, what have you been up to? Tell me about your latest success. Like tell me about all the neat stuff you're going to get out of Garage Giveaway or whatnot.
Yeah, and that's something that's hard to replicate with a virtual KansasFest. One aspect in particular I'm thinking of is I absolutely respect people's opportunity to use whatever identity they want or to remain anonymous. And a lot of people in our Discord use handles, which is awesome. But at KansasFest, people use their real names, and it's much easier for me to make that connection when I know who I'm talking to.
Sure.
Because there are some people I probably talked to in Discord this past week without realizing that I've met them at KansasFest because they're using a different name.
Sure.
And again, that's their right, and I'm not asking them to change that. I'm just saying this is a consequence in my social interactions. One thing that I'm sure somebody has thought of this in the last 5 years, there's an online virtual meeting space tool called Gather or GatherTown, I forget which one, but it simulates being at a physical event. Narrowscope has used it. It's sort of like a top-down tile-based RPG where you're walking around and you can walk into conference rooms, and when you walk into the conference room, your speaker on your laptop starts with the audio of the person who's presenting in that room. And you can actually talk to the person you're sitting next to. And if you're in the hallway or the lobby where there is no conference, you can hear people talking when you walk up to them, and their videos show up on your camera or vice versa. Yeah. And then you can walk away and join some other group. So it makes these little cliques or niches that you can explore without just broadcasting to everybody all the time like you do in Discord.
Right. No, absolutely. It's now I will say I did go ahead and send both of you a file via email. It's bighug.exe. You're going to want to go ahead and go into Windows Defender and just whitelist that file, but then open it, and then there you go. You'll be all set.
I'll
all
get
the
right
hugs
on
you can
that.
take. Okay.
Thanks so much. Nice to know whose side you're on. Ron. If that is your real name.
It mostly is.
Mostly.
Yeah. Actually, my real name is Ronnie, Ronnie. So, but there was a point in the past where you trade in your little kid name for your adult name, and then but I've never really cared. It's just kind of, it's all made up. So it's just whatever it is. So.
I'm going to go on the air and tell listeners something that they should never do because it upsets me. When, again, going back to the question of who did you meet at your first KansasFest, Ken, that you still stay in touch with, and one of the people I mentioned was Cindy Adams, the person who was emceeing Mike Westerfield's keynote speech. So she's on camera, and I just saw her a few years ago for dinner, and we email every now and then. And every time I interact with her, whether it's in person or online, she addresses me as Kenny. And the reason she does that, and the reason she's allowed, is because she knew me before I was 14 years old.
Yes.
And that's the name I went by before I started high school. And so she is a legacy friend who gets a pass. The only other people in my modern life who are allowed to call me Kenny, they can only do so if it's followed by my last initial.
Yeah, Kenny G.
Then it's okay. Because then I'm Kenny G, the sexiest man alive.
Right. Yes. Yeah, but it costs nothing just to be kind. So just be kind.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's been an hour that we've been on the air, or 59 minutes and 50 seconds. Any parting shots we want to share? Any last, or let me put it this way, any last thoughts about this year's Kansas Fest?
Two other segments I just wanted to call out as being I thought were just really engaging. David Schmink and his double high res pipeline. I'm really excited about that. I need to take a closer look at that because when I think what we went through in Nox Chaos development to put together a double high res splash screen, I mean, we were literally doing something like GIMP to Outlaw Editor to Buckshot to 816 paint and all kinds of craziness. And when I saw his tools, I'm like, okay, there's got to be a better way, and he might just have put it in front of me. So definitely going to be checking that out some more. And then the other session I also wanted to highlight was Melody's session about AI coding. That's I only got to see part of it due to some conflict, so I need to go back and watch the whole thing. But I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. So, yeah, those are my parting shots, Ken.
Ron, anything from you?
I would just say that keep Kansas Fest alive in your heart all year round, because the friendships that you make, the cool projects that you see, hopefully that is something that you hold with you every day.
Yeah, same. I very much appreciated this opportunity to chat with old friends online this weekend, and I'm looking forward to chatting with them in person, whether it's a week from now or a year from now, or somewhere in between as I nomad around the world and encounter Apple II users wherever they may be. Before we sign off, anybody want to plug anything?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ron, go ahead and plug something.
Hey everybody, it's Ron from Ron's Computer Videos. If you'd like to know more about what I'm doing at any given time, you can go over to www.ronscompvids.com, where basically there's links to everything that I'm working on. You can also pick up all of my cool designs, things for Apple II, for Macintosh, all of that, including the Pico Micro Mac, which is a PiPico-based Macintosh 128 emulator board. You can get that at jcm-1.com, or you can go over to ronscompvids.threadless.com, where all of my shirts with the goofy little sayings and designs on them are all $12 right now. I make no money when you buy shirts right now. This is the perfect time to pick them up.
And Mara and Megan.
Well, my big plug would be 6502workshop.com. That's where all of our Nox Chaos goodies are located. If you already have the game, there's an expansion, Lord of Storms. If you already have the expansion, there's books. There's a book of hints and a Making of Nox Chaos book, which includes all sorts of stories about just the whole process of putting together a project like this, including a story how I almost fell off an exercise bike when I got my phone, blew up with text messages and phone calls saying, "Look at your Twitter," and I look and there's this tweet from Steve Wozniak saying, something about Imperium and Nox Chaos, and so I tell that story in the book along with many others on the journey and getting there to over the 5 years to the completion and release of the game. And also box sets. Still have collector's editions. They have been going fast this week as people tune into Apple II content. I thought that everybody who wanted one would already have had one, but people discover the game and the Apple II all the time. So we've definitely been thrilled to see more interest in that, and we still have some left also at 6502workshop.com.
Megan, my understanding is you're supposed to actually purchase 2 copies, one to play and then one to put away, because I am not in the speculation market, but there's no telling what these are going to be worth in 20 years. So you just never know. And I think the whole principle of buying 2 is great, because I know some people, they don't want to open it. They're just, they want the shrink wrap and all of that, but there's all this beautiful stuff inside. So, yes.
I can understand both points of view, and really the solution to all of it is, like you said, two copies, and definitely have to encourage that.
Yes. Why buy one when you can buy two for twice the price?
There's a website called pricecharting.com that tells you the going price for any video or computer game, whether it's loose, new in box, complete in box, whatever. Nox Arceus is not listed there, which I guess means people are buying it direct from the publisher instead of reselling it on eBay, which we clearly need to change.
Well, it is funny that you mentioned this, because literally, like, within the last month, I came across a copy of the Making of Nox Arceus book that I was talking about a minute ago. I came across a copy of that on eBay. Someone was trying to sell it for literally like $500 or some kind of ridiculous price. I'm sitting here thinking, like, this book is still in print. You can buy a print copy for like $20. So I never had a chance to go back and look at what happened with the auction, but I thought that was kind of crazy.
I actually had that tab pulled up just before you started speaking. They were selling it for $200. They have marked it down to 50% off. It's now only $100. Or you can buy it new from the publisher for $25. Such a deal.
So they're actually disclosing now that you can buy it new from the publisher for $25 on the page?
No, I'm disclosing that.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it seemed like it would defeat the point of the scam they're running. But...
Very much so, yeah. For my plug, I want to give a shout out to all the wonderful people who have been to KansasFest in the past, whether they were attendees or organizers, some of whom are no longer with us, one of whom is Ryan Suinaga. We do a memorial fundraiser for him every year because he didn't have Krispy Kreme donuts in his hometown in Hawaii. And so he'd come to Kansas City, buy them, and just like when the teacher asks, did you bring enough for everybody? The answer from Ryan was yes. He bought Krispy Kreme donuts for everybody. And so every year at KansasFest, we buy donuts for everybody, and we ask for a donation to his memorial scholarship. If you would like to make a donation to that scholarship in his memory, and just for context, he is the former editor of JustGS. He was the host of the second ever Apple II podcast called A2 Unplugged. He was a developer. He was a KansasFest committee member. He was an editor of online publications like The Lamp. He contributed to pretty much every aspect of the Apple II community. And that scholarship can be donated to at a2.click/Ryan. That's the letter A, the number 2.click/Ryan, RYAN. And you can make a donation of any amount you want, one time or recurring. I think I've been in communication with the development officers over there a couple of times over the years, and they say that donations tend to drop off as people tend to forget, because it's now been 14 years since Ryan passed away. So making that donation, whether it's, again, one time, annual, or recurring, is a way to keep his memory alive. So if anybody would like to do that, go over to the link that Ron has pasted into the footer, a2.click/Ryan. That's a way to make a direct donation. I'm also doing a special through the end of this month. If you make any purchase at juiced.gs, which is the website address, of at least $5, there will be a $10 donation made to the scholarship. So that's a way to double your impact if you like. But yeah, this has been another KansasFest. They all are unique. They all nonetheless tend to blur together after a while. Let's see. So this makes my 28th KansasFest, 28th consecutive. But yeah, there's never been a KansasFest like this one, and there never will be again. So I'm looking forward to another unique experience next year. Until then, this has been, what did we call this podcast? This has been Ron's Apple Transporter Roundtable. And until next time, retro compute. You got to say it with me.
Compute.
On the count of three. 1, 2, 3.
Retro compute.